The year was 2387. The universe was not a friendly place. It never had been, out in the darkness between stars. Among the cold and silence of space, only one rule existed. The strong survive, the weak disappear, and for 10,000 years. One empire had made sure of that rule, the Galactic Empire. They did not start small, no empire ever does. But the Galactic Empire grew faster than any civilization before them. In the beginning, they were just one species. The Vorkai, tall, gray-skinned, with 4 arms and black eyes that never seemed to blink. They came from a dying planet in the outer rim of the Milky Way. Their sun was fading. Their oceans were drying up. Their people were desperate, so they did what desperate people often do. They looked at their neighbors and decided to take what they needed. The first planet they conquered was called Saren. It was a green world, full of life, full of a gentle people called the Serenai, who had never built a single weapon in their entire history. They believed the universe was peaceful. They were wrong. The Vorkai arrived with warships and fire. The Serenai tried to talk. The Vorkai did not want to talk in 3 days. Saren was under Vorkai control in 1 month. The Serenai were working in mines, pulling out minerals for their new masters. The Galactic Empire had begun. Over the next 10,000 years, the empire grew and grew, planet by planet, system by system. Any species that fought back was destroyed completely. Any species that surrendered was allowed to live, but only as servants. 47 civilizations had been wiped from existence, not defeated, not enslaved, erased. Their planets cracked open like eggs. Their atmospheres burned away. Their histories deleted from all records. The Empire did not like to leave reminders. Reminders gave survivors hope. And hope, the Empire had learned long ago, was the most dangerous thing in the universe by 2387. The Galactic Empire controlled 60% of the known galaxy. They had 3 million warships. They had weapons that could crack a moon in half. They had soldiers on 10,000 worlds. And they had one simple rule for every new species they discovered. Surrender or disappear. There was no third option. There had never needed to be. Then they found Earth. It started with a scout ship, a small Vorkai vessel, barely the size of a cargo freighter, was mapping the outer edges of the Sol system. The pilot, a young officer named Drax, was bored. He had been on mapping duty for 6 months. Nothing interesting ever happened on mapping duty. Then his scanner beeped. He looked at the screen and frowned. There was a planet, third from the sun, covered mostly in water and green land. Standard Class M world. He almost moved on. Then the scanner beeped again, radio signals. Thousands of them, no, millions. The planet was absolutely screaming with radio signals, television broadcasts, internet transmissions, satellite communications, military frequencies, civilian chatter, music, news, arguments, laughter. Drax sat up straight. He had never seen a planet produce so much signal noise. It was like the entire world was shouting at once. He checked the population count: 8 billion. 8 billion individual creatures, all talking at the same time. Drax sent his report to Empire Command and waited. The reply came back in 4 hours. Standard protocol, send the ultimatum. The ultimatum arrived at Earth on a Tuesday morning. It did not come quietly. An Empire ship 3 times the size of any human aircraft carrier appeared in orbit above Earth without any warning. Every telescope on the planet pointed at it instantly. Every news channel cut to breaking coverage. Every government on Earth scrambled their military in the first 60 seconds. The ship just sat there. It did not fire, it did not move, it simply waited. Then, on every single communication frequency humanity used, on every television channel, every radio station, every phone, every internet-connected device on the entire planet, a message appeared. It was in perfect English, perfect Mandarin, perfect Spanish, perfect Hindi, perfect Arabic, in every major language on Earth. The same message played: People of Earth, you have been discovered by the Galactic Empire. You have 24 hours to transmit your complete and unconditional surrender. A representative of the Empire will arrive to accept your surrender and begin the transition of your planet to Imperial control. If you do not surrender within 24 hours, your planet will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is your only option. The Galactic Empire does not offer second chances. The message played on loop. Every 30 minutes for 24 hours. The reaction on Earth was exactly what anyone might expect. Chaos in every major city. People flooded into the streets. Some were crying, some were praying. Some were packing bags as if they had somewhere to run. Governments called emergency sessions. Military generals pulled out plans they had made for exactly this kind of moment. Plans most of them had never believed they would actually need. Social media exploded. Some people said surrender immediately. That fighting was suicide. Some people said fight no matter what. That dying free was better than living as a slave. Some people said the whole thing was fake. A government trick, a movie promotion, something. Anything other than what it obviously was, but most people, when they finally sat quietly and looked up at the sky and saw that enormous ship just hanging there above the clouds like a dark moon, most people felt the same thing. Fear, cold, deep, very real fear. But in a mountain facility buried under 300 meters of rock in an undisclosed location, in a room with no windows and very bad coffee, something different was happening. There was no chaos in that room. There was no crying. There were 43 people sitting around a long table, and every single one of them was completely calm. This was the Emergency Unified Defense Council, a group that had existed in secret for 11 years. It had been created after astronomers detected unusual energy signatures coming from deep space, signatures that did not match any natural phenomenon. Most governments had wanted to keep it quiet. No need to panic the public, they said. Probably nothing, they said. But a small group of scientists, military strategists, and engineers had not been so sure. They had spent 11 years preparing, not for peace, for exactly this. At the head of the table sat a woman named General Amara Osei. She was 61 years old, her hair was short and white. She had spent 30 years in Earth's combined military forces and another 11 years running this secret council. She was not panicking, she was thinking. Around her sat the best minds Earth had ever produced, Dr. Chen Wei, the physicist who had spent a decade reverse engineering every piece of alien technology humanity had ever collected, mostly meteorite fragments and old satellite debris that seemed too perfectly designed to be natural. Admiral Yusuf Crane, commander of Earth's combined space fleet, a fleet that officially had 42 ships and unofficially had 43. The 43rd ship was the reason nobody in that room was panicking. They gave us 24 hours, said one of the council members, a young diplomat named Marcus Hale. He was the newest member of the group and the only one who looked genuinely frightened. 24 hours before they destroy the planet. They won't destroy the planet, said Dr. Chen Wei without looking up from his notes. They want the planet, said Admiral Crane. A destroyed planet is worthless to them. They want our resources, our population, our land. A dead planet gives them nothing. That's comforting, said Marcus. It was meant to be, said the Admiral. General Osei stood up. The room went quiet immediately. She had that kind of presence, the kind that did not need to ask for silence. We have spent 11 years preparing for this moment, she said, her voice completely steady. We always knew it was coming. We always knew it would be exactly like this. A bigger power showing up and expecting us to kneel. She looked around the table. We are not going to kneel. Silence. We are going to send them a message, she continued. And then we are going to send them the Odyssey. The room was very still. Marcus looked around, confused by the reaction, or rather the lack of one. Everyone else at the table simply nodded, as if this was the most natural thing in the world, as if sending a single ship against an empire of 3 million warships was a perfectly reasonable plan. The message Earth sent back to the Galactic Empire was short. We have received your ultimatum. We choose not to surrender. We are sending one ship to meet your fleet. We suggest you pay attention. In orbit above Earth, in the command center of the Imperial Scout vessel. Drax read the message 3 times. Then he read it a 4th time. He checked the translation to make sure it was correct. It was. He sent it up the chain of command and waited for the response. The response from Imperial High Command took 6 minutes. It said, confirmed, proceed with standard termination protocol. These humans are clearly not intelligent enough to understand their situation. Drax looked out the viewport at the small blue planet below. He almost felt sorry for them. Almost. 22 hours into the 24-hour ultimatum, humanity watched a ship leave Earth. It launched from a facility in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a platform so classified that most governments did not officially know it existed. The ship rose slowly through the clouds, and when it cleared the atmosphere and people got their first good look at it through telescopes and cameras and satellite feeds, there was a moment of complete silence across every broadcast on Earth. It was not impressive. At least it did not look impressive. The Odyssey was long and narrow, roughly the shape of an old naval destroyer. Gunmetal gray with no visible weapons, no visible engines, and several sections that appeared to have burn marks and impact damage from previous Tests, it looked old, it looked used, it looked, honestly, a little broken. On social media, the comments were not kind, that's it? We're sending that against their fleet? Is this a joke? Someone please tell me this is not our only plan. High above Earth? Drax watched the Odyssey on his scanner and actually laughed. He opened a channel to Imperial Command. The humans have launched one vessel, he reported. It appears to be a short-range military ship. Heavily damaged, no visible weapon systems. I am reading unusual energy signatures but nothing significant. The reply from Command was immediate. Let it come. Record everything for the archives. This will be a useful example for other species that consider resistance. Drax nodded and settled back into his chair. He watched the Odyssey drift slowly toward the Empire's waiting fleet. 10,000 warships arranged in a formation that filled the scanner screen from edge to edge, and one small, gray, slightly battered-looking human ship moving calmly toward them. He shook his head. These humans, he thought, were either the bravest creatures in the galaxy, or the most foolish inside the Odyssey. It was quiet. Not the nervous quiet of people who are afraid. The focused quiet of people who have prepared for something for a very long time and are finally ready to do it. Commander Yara Ose sat in the captain's chair. She was 34 years old and the daughter of General Amara Ose. She had dark eyes and a calm face and hands that had not shaken once since the ship launched. Around her, her crew of 61 moved through their stations with precise, practiced efficiency. They had run this scenario in simulation 4,000 times. 4,000. They knew every possible response the Empire might have. They had a counter for each one. Yara looked at the scanner screen. 10,000 ships. She counted them the same way she had counted them in every simulation. Then she did what she always did at this point in the simulation. She smiled. Helm, she said quietly. Yes. Commander, take us in. On the scanner, the Odyssey moved forward, straight toward the heart of the Empire fleet. Not slowing down, not turning, not stopping. The alien ambassadors from a dozen subject species who were watching the feed from Imperial ships could not understand what they were seeing. One of them, a four-eyed creature from a planet called Veth, turned to his colleague and said something that translated roughly as, "Why are they not running?" His colleague had no answer, because there was no logical answer. No species ever, in 10,000 years of Imperial history, had ever looked at the full might of the Galactic Empire, and simply kept walking toward it. The Imperial Admiral in command of the fleet was a Vorkai named Scareth. He had conquered 11 planets personally. He had overseen the destruction of 3 civilizations. He was not a man who felt surprise easily, but as he watched this single, small, unremarkable human ship move steadily toward his fleet without slowing down, without attempting communication, without any apparent fear whatsoever, he felt something unfamiliar move through him. He pushed it aside. It was nothing. Prepare all weapons, he ordered. Target the human vessel. Awaiting your order to fire. Admiral? Scareth leaned forward in his command chair. He watched the Odyssey come closer. And closer. It did not stop. It did not turn. Admiral, said his weapons officer, the human ship has just activated something. I am reading an energy buildup unlike anything in our records. Scareth stared at the scanner. What kind of energy? He asked. The weapons officer looked up from his console, and for the first time in his career, his voice was uncertain. I don't know. Admiral, Scareth looked at the little gray ship on his screen. It was glowing now, faintly at first, then brighter, back on Earth. 8 billion people watched their screens in that mountain facility. General Amara Ose stood with her hands behind her back and watched the feed from the Odyssey's external cameras. 10,000 enemy ships on one side, one human ship on the other. Her ship, her daughter. She did not let herself think about that last part. She was a general first, everything else second, but her hands, hidden behind her back where no one could see them, were shaking just a little on the Odyssey. Commander Yara watched the Empire fleet fill her entire view screen. 10,000 ships. She had stared at this image in simulation so many times it almost felt like a memory. Almost. She opened the ship-wide channel. Her voice was calm, completely calm. All crew, this is the commander. We are now entering weapons range. You all know what comes next. You all know what this ship can do. You have trained for this moment. You are ready. Let's show them what one human ship looks like when it stops being polite. She closed the channel, looked at the view screen, looked at 10,000 ships waiting to destroy everything she had ever known, and said one single word, activate. The Odyssey blazed like a new star, and the Galactic Empire, for the first time in 10,000 years, felt something it had never felt before, fear. The universe had a memory. It remembered every battle ever fought across its billions of years of existence. It remembered the first wars between the earliest civilizations, fought with rocks and fire on small forgotten worlds. It remembered the great fleet battles of the Vorkai expansion. When 1,000 ships became 10,000 and 10,000 became 1,000,000. It remembered the destruction of the Serenai, the burning of Veth Prime, the silencing of 47 worlds that would never speak again. The universe remembered all of it. But it had never seen anything like what was about to happen in the Sol system on a Tuesday morning in the year 2387. Because what was about to happen had never happened before. Not once, not anywhere, not in 10,000 years of Imperial history. Admiral Scarith was not a nervous being. Nervousness was something he had burned out of himself a long time ago. The way you burn a weed out of a garden. Deliberately and completely, leaving no root behind. He had conquered 11 planets. He had watched 3 civilizations end. He had sat in command chairs on ships that were on fire and given orders in the same flat. Cold voice he used when giving orders on ships that were perfectly fine. Nothing made him nervous. He told himself this as he stared at his scanner. He told himself this as the Odyssey moved toward his fleet at a slow, completely unhurried speed, as if it had all the time in the universe. He told himself this as the energy readings from that small gray human ship climbed higher than anything his instruments had ever been designed to measure. He was not nervous. The tightness in his chest was something else entirely. He had no idea what it was. All weapons, he said. His voice was flat and cold, exactly as it always was. Fire! The Imperial fleet fired all of it, every weapon on every ship. Activated simultaneously on a single target. The combined firepower of 10,000 warships was a number so large that the human scientist who later tried to calculate it had to invent new mathematical notation just to write it down. It was not a battle. It was not even an attack, it was an erasure. The space between the fleet and the Odyssey ceased to exist as a concept. There was no space, there was no darkness. There was no distance, there was only light. White and absolute and total, a wall of pure converted energy that traveled across the gap between the fleet and the Odyssey in less than 1 second and hit the human ship like the fist of a god. Every camera watching went blind. Every sensor array across the Sol system registered a spike and shut itself down to prevent damage. On Earth, 8 billion screens went white. In the mountain facility, General Amara Ose stood perfectly still. The screen in front of her was white. The room around her was completely silent. She could hear the ventilation system humming. She could hear someone breathing too fast 3 seats to her left. She could hear her own heartbeat. She did not move, she did not speak, she was a general. She had made her plan and executed her plan, and now the plan was doing what it was doing, and there was nothing left for her to do but wait. She waited. Inside the Odyssey, something extraordinary was happening. The energy hit the ship's absorption field like water hitting a sponge. Not like a wall hitting a wall. Not like a force meeting a resistance. Like water hitting a sponge, the field took it. All of it, every beam, every torpedo, every pulse, every lance, every type of weapon the Empire had ever developed. All of it flowing into the Odyssey's absorption matrix in one enormous continuous wave. The ship's interior lit up. Every surface blazed with a deep electric blue that had no business existing outside of a physics laboratory. Every panel, every screen, every metal wall, every floor plate, every ceiling glowing from within. The noise inside the ship was extraordinary. Not an explosion, not a crash, a hum, a deep resonating building hum that started in the floor and traveled up through the crew's boots and into their legs and into their chests and sat there vibrating, the way a very large bell vibrates after you strike it. Dr. Ren Okafor was not a man built for dramatic moments. He was a short, round, extremely precise engineer from Lagos who preferred his drama in the form of novels, and had once told Commander Yara that if anything on the ship ever actually went dramatically wrong, she should not expect him to behave well about it. He was staring at his engineering console now with an expression on his face that was not quite calm, and not quite panic, but somewhere in between. A very focused, very intense somewhere in between. The numbers on his screen were not numbers he had ever seen outside of theoretical simulations. Field saturation, he said, and his voice only shook a little, which he considered a personal victory, climbing past 400%. 500, Commander, we are taking all of it. The capacitors are responding exactly as designed. 600, 700, talk to me. Ren, said Yara from the captain's chair. She had not stood up. She had not gripped anything. She was sitting in exactly the same position she had been sitting in before the Empire fired, one leg crossed over the other, watching the monitors. 800%, said Wren. 900, Commander, the field is holding. I repeat, the field is holding, every system nominal. No structural stress beyond design parameters. I am reading. He stopped, looked at his screen, looked at it again. Wren, said Yara. Complete absorption. Commander, he said, and his voice had gone very quiet now. Quiet in the way that a voice goes quiet when a person realizes they are standing in the middle of a moment that will be told as a story for the rest of their life. We took all of it. Every joule they fired at us is now inside this ship. Field saturation is holding at 943%, and the capacitors are stable. He turned around and looked at Yara. We are 40 times more powerful than when we arrived. The bridge was completely silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then Lieutenant Priya Mock at the weapons console said very softly, "Oh, that's brilliant," and Dr. Ren Okafor laughed. A short, surprised, completely genuine laugh. The laugh of a man who has spent years building something and has just watched it work perfectly for the first time. Yes, he said, it really is. Yara stood up. She walked to the forward view screen and looked at the Imperial fleet. 10,000 ships still in formation, not moving. She could imagine what was happening over there right now. The confusion, the frantic checking and rechecking of sensor readings, the officers looking at each other across consoles, trying to find a reasonable explanation for what their instruments were telling them. The Admiral sitting very still, trying to hold his face together. She had run this moment in simulation so many times, but the simulation had never quite captured what it actually felt like to stand here and look at them and really know that the math had worked, that the physics had worked, that 11 years of preparation had worked. She turned to Priya. "Do you have targets?" she asked. Priya's fingers were already moving. "I have been building the targeting solution for the last 40 seconds. Commander," she said without looking up, her eyes tracking across the display in front of her, with the particular focused stillness of someone who is completely in their element. "I have identified 312 priority targets in the Imperial formation. All communication and command relay vessels. Disabling them cuts Admiral Scareth's fleet off from direct contact with Imperial High Command. He will have to make all further decisions independently, without guidance, without support, and without the ability to call for reinforcements." She looked up. "It is a precise shot, Commander, very precise. I will need to calibrate the pulse spread to within a margin of half a degree to avoid hitting non-target vessels." "Can you do it?" asked Yara. Priya looked almost offended. "I have done it in simulation 800 times. "That was simulation, Commander," said Priya, very patiently, the way a person speaks when they are choosing not to say what they actually want to say. "I can do it." Yara looked at her for one moment, then nodded. "Do it." Priya fired one pulse, blue-white, fast, precise, spreading outward from the Odyssey in a controlled fan pattern that had taken Priya 4 months to design and 800 simulations to perfect. It lasted 1.7 seconds when it ended. 312 Imperial ships were dark, not destroyed, dark. Every system on those vessels, engines, weapons, communications, life support, backup, navigation, every single thing, overloaded in the same instant by a pulse calibrated to hit every system simultaneously at its precise resonant frequency. The crews were breathing, the ships were dead. The effect on the remaining Imperial fleet was not what Scareth would have called a military response. It was closer to what a biologist might call a freezing behavior. The moment the 312 vessels went dark, every other ship in the fleet stopped. Not on command, not because Scareth ordered it. Because the crews stopped. Because weapons officers and navigation officers and communications officers and captains and admirals across 10,000 ships looked at their scanners and saw what had happened. Saw 300 ships disabled in under 2 seconds. Saw the targeting precision involved. Understood what that precision meant. And simply could not move for a moment, could not think, could not act, because understanding had arrived before procedure could. And what they understood was this: the human ship had not fired everything it had. It had fired a tiny fraction of what it had. It had chosen specific targets. It had hit only those targets. It had not touched a single other vessel, which meant the human ship was not fighting desperately. It was not throwing power in all directions and hoping. It was selecting, choosing, deciding what to hit and what to leave alone. And the question that settled over the entire Imperial fleet like a cold fog was simple and terrible. If it was choosing what to hit, then what else was it choosing not to hit? And why? Scareth understood it before any of his officers did. He understood it the same way he understood most things. Quickly and completely and without much comfort. He did the math in his head in about 4 seconds. The human ship had absorbed all of his fleet's combined firepower. It had used a tiny fraction of that energy to disable 300 vessels with surgical precision. The remaining energy in its field could, conservatively, destroy the remaining 97% of his fleet. It had chosen not to, which meant it was making a point. Not a military point, a statement, we can end you, we are deciding not to. Think about what that means. He opened his mouth to give the retreat order. His navigation officer spoke first, Admiral, he said, very carefully. The kind of careful that a person uses when they are about to deliver information they do not fully believe themselves. I am reading a gravity field extending from the human vessel. Scareth looked at him. And? It is encompassing the entire fleet, Admiral. A pause. All ships, said the navigation officer, are locked in place. Helm is not responding. Engines are not responding. We cannot move. Scareth turned back to the view screen. The Odyssey was moving toward him. Slowly, steadily, unhurried, pulsing blue. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only in military command centers, when something happens that nobody in the room has any training for. It is different from the silence of a room where people are waiting. Different from the silence of a room where people are afraid. It is the silence of people who have spent their entire professional lives knowing what to do in any situation, who have drilled and studied and prepared for every eventuality they could imagine, and who have just encountered something that was not in any drill, was not in any study, was not in any imagination. That silence existed on the bridge of Scareth's command ship right now. And in that silence, the Odyssey kept coming. Commander Yara opened a communication channel. She did not use a coded Imperial frequency. She used an open broadcast, transmitted on every channel simultaneously, so that every ship in the fleet could hear, every observer vessel hiding at the edges of the system could hear, every species listening across the galaxy could hear. Admiral Scareth, she said. And her voice was clear and unhurried and carried no anger in it at all, which was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. My name is Commander Yara Osi. I am speaking to you openly and honestly. I have disabled your communication ships, so that this conversation is between your fleet and mine. Without Imperial High Command listening in and making decisions on your behalf. She paused for exactly 1 second. I want you to understand your situation completely. This ship absorbed everything you fired at us, all of it. The energy you gave us has made us the most powerful vessel in this system by a very large margin. I could end this engagement in the next 3 minutes. Every ship in your fleet, disabled or destroyed. I want you to know that clearly. I am not exaggerating. Silence on the channel. Then carefully Scareth's voice, then why haven't you? It was, Yara thought, exactly the right question. The question of a mind that was working, that was still thinking even under pressure. She had expected him to bluster, to threaten, to demand. Instead, he had asked the real question immediately. She respected that. Because that is not what we came here to do, she said. We came here to demonstrate something. Not to destroy, not to conquer, to demonstrate. Your empire came to our planet expecting to find something easy. Something frightened, something that would either bow down or die quickly. You found something different. We want you to understand how different. We want you to go back to your emperor with a very clear report. And what report is that? Said Scareth. Yara looked at the view screen. At the locked fleet. At 10,000 ships that could not move. At the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Completely helpless, that humanity, she said. Spent 11 years preparing specifically for this moment. That we studied every weapon your empire has ever used. That we built a ship designed to absorb all of them. That when you fired everything you had at us, you made us stronger. And that when we had you completely in our power, we chose not to destroy you. We want your emperor to sit with that information. We want him to understand what kind of species he is dealing with before he decides to try this again. Long silence. You would release us, said Scareth slowly. You have us completely, every ship locked, every weapon useless. And you would simply release us. Yes, in exchange for what? Nothing, said Yara. We release you, you go home. You tell your emperor the truth about what happened here. That is all. The silence that followed was the longest silence of the entire engagement. 47 seconds, Yara counted them. She had nothing else to do. The Odyssey held its position, pulsing blue, waiting, on a small observation vessel parked at the very edge of the Sol system, far enough away that the Imperial fleet's automated sensors had not noticed it. A crew of 12 beings sat in total darkness watching the broadcast. They were Serenei. The gentle species from the first planet the Empire had ever conquered. They had been slaves for 10,000 years. For 10,000 years they had done what the Empire told them to do, gone where the Empire told them to go, built what the Empire told them to build. They had learned not to hope. Hope was too expensive. Hope cost too much when it failed, but they had a habit, many of them, of listening to radio frequencies the Empire did not know they monitored. And tonight they had heard something they did not know how to process. One of them, an old female named Sale, who had been listening to forbidden frequencies for 40 years and had never heard anything worth the risk until tonight, reached out in the darkness and took the hand of the younger Serenai sitting next to her. She did not say anything. There were no words for what she was feeling. The younger Serenai looked at her and saw that she was crying. He had never seen her cry in all his years of knowing her. Through all the things the Empire had done, all the losses, all the silences, all the long dark years, he had never seen her cry. "What is it?" he whispered. Sale pointed at the screen, at the small blue glowing ship, at the locked Imperial fleet, at the words still playing on the open channel. She could not explain it. She just pointed. Scareth gave the order. Not the retreat order, not yet. First, he gave the fleet stand-down order. Weapons powered off, all aggressive systems disengaged. Then he opened a channel back to the Odyssey. "Commander Osi," he said, and his voice was doing something it had not done in a very long time. Something his officers noticed and filed away and would talk about later in careful whispers. It was doing something almost like respect. "I will take your message to the Emperor." "Thank you, Admiral," said Yara. "I have one question," said Scareth. "Ask it." "The weapon you built," he said, "the absorption field. How long did it take you to develop it?" Yara was quiet for a moment. 11 years, she said. Another silence. "You built it before we arrived," said Scareth. "You built it before first contact?" "Yes, you knew we were coming, we suspected," said Yara. "We prepared. That is what humans do when we suspect something. We prepare." Scareth looked at his view screen, at the small gray ship that had just done something no ship in Imperial history had ever done. "I see," he said quietly. The gravity field released. It happened gradually, ship by ship from the outer edges of the formation inward, so that no ship would collide with another in the scramble to move. A detail, Scareth noted, that required considerable precision and considerable consideration of the welfare of his crew, from a ship that could have simply let them all crash into each other. From a ship that could have destroyed them all, he did not know what to do with that. He filed it away for later. The Imperial fleet left. They did not call it a retreat in their official logs. They called it a tactical redeployment pending further assessment. But every being on every ship knew what it was. They had arrived with 10,000 warships and the absolute certainty that nothing in this system could stop them. They were leaving because something in this system had stopped them completely, without even trying very hard. The last Imperial ship crossed out of the Sol system, 47 minutes after the gravity field released. The Odyssey watched them go. Inside the ship, no one cheered. This surprised some of the younger crew members, who had half expected someone to shout or celebrate, or at least make some kind of noise acknowledging that they had just repelled the most powerful military force in the known galaxy with one ship and 61 people. But the older crew members, the ones who had been on the project longest, understood why there was no cheering because they all knew the same thing. This was not the end, this was the first move. The Empire would go home and think, and then the Empire would come back, and next time they would come differently. Yara sat back down in her captain's chair. She looked at the empty scanner screen where 10,000 enemy ships had been 20 minutes ago. "Signal Earth," she said. Lieutenant Priya opened the channel. Yara spoke. "Earth. This is Commander Osei aboard the Odyssey. The Imperial fleet has withdrawn from the Sol system. All 61 crew are unharmed. The Odyssey is fully operational at 943% field capacity." She paused. "Tell everyone to rest tonight. Tomorrow we have a great deal of work to do." This was the beginning, not the end. The Empire will think about what happened here, and when they are done thinking, they will make a decision. We need to make sure they make the right one. She closed the channel, looked at the stars, thought about 47 civilizations, thought about 10,000 years of fear, thought about a four-eyed creature on a ship somewhere watching a small human vessel do something no one had ever done, thought about what it might mean for everyone, not just for Earth. In the mountain facility on Earth, General Amara Osei had not moved for the past hour. She was still standing in front of her screen, still watching. When the last Imperial ship disappeared from the Sol system scanner, and the space around Earth was empty and quiet, and theirs again. She finally exhaled one long, slow breath. The room around her erupted. People were hugging, laughing, some crying, voices overlapping, a noise that was entirely human and entirely wonderful. Amara stood in the middle of it and let it happen around her. Then she raised one hand, the room quieted. "We have one night," she said. "One night to be glad about what happened today. One night to call your families to sleep to feel what you are feeling right now." She looked around the room, at the faces of the people who had spent 11 years building toward this moment. "Tomorrow morning we start phase 2. Because my daughter was right, this was the beginning. And the beginning is the easy part," she paused. "Get some sleep far across the galaxy." In a throne room built from the bones of conquered worlds, a message was being delivered to the Emperor of the Galactic Empire. The Emperor was very old, very patient. He had ruled for 300 years. He had never received a message like this one. He read it twice. Then he set it down and looked out the enormous window at the stars. One human ship had absorbed everything his fleet had fired. One human ship had locked 10,000 of his vessels in place. One human ship had released them without destroying a single one. He sat with that for a long time, then he called for his best general. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire had a room that nobody knew about. Not his generals, not his advisors. Not even his personal guards. It was a small room. Deep inside the Imperial Palace, behind 3 doors that only opened for him, carved into the rock of the planet itself like a secret the world was keeping. There was nothing in it, no furniture, no screens, no windows. Just rock walls and silence and a single light that never changed. He came here when he needed to think. He had been coming here for 300 years. In that time, he had made decisions in that room that had ended civilizations, redirected the course of history, shaped the lives of 1 trillion beings across 60% of the known galaxy. He was not a cruel being by nature, he was a practical one. Cruelty was simply a tool that practical beings sometimes needed. He sat on the floor of that room now in the dark, and he thought about one small gray ship. He thought about it for 6 hours. Then he stood up, walked out and called for General Marin. General Marin was not like Scareth. Scareth was a conqueror. He was built for the open charge, the overwhelming force, the application of so much power that resistance became mathematically pointless. Marin was something else. She was thin, pale, quiet, with eyes that moved constantly, taking in everything, missing nothing. She had never led a fleet into open battle. She had never needed to. In 40 years of Imperial service, she had ended resistance on 19 worlds without firing a single weapon. She used patience. She used information. She used the particular cruelty of knowing exactly where something hurt and pressing there, precisely, deliberately until it broke. The Emperor told her what had happened in the Sol system. She already knew. She had been watching the entire engagement on a private feed that not even Scareth knew existed. She had watched the Odyssey absorb everything. She had watched 300 Imperial ships go dark in under 2 seconds. She had watched the gravity field lock the fleet in place. She had watched Scareth have a conversation with a human commander and come away from it sounding, of all things, thoughtful. She had watched all of it, and she had been thinking ever since. "The ship is not the problem," she said, before the Emperor had finished speaking. He stopped, looked at her. "Explain," he said. "The ship is extraordinary," said Marin. "The technology is extraordinary. But technology can be countered. Technology can be overcome. Technology is not the problem," she paused. "The commander is the problem." The Emperor waited. "Commander Yara Ose built that engagement around a single insight," said Marin. "She understood that our fleet would fire everything at once. She prepared for it. She turned our greatest strength into her greatest advantage. That kind of thinking cannot be answered with more ships or bigger weapons. You cannot outweapon a mind that turns weapons against you. Then how do you answer it?" said the Emperor. Marin was quiet for a moment. "You do not fight the ship," she said. "You fight the commander. Every mind has a weakness. Every person has something they cannot be rational about. Something that reaches past the thinking and touches something older and deeper." She looked at the Emperor. "You find what Commander Ose cannot think clearly about, and you use it." The information came back in 72 hours. Marin had networks on every world the Empire controlled. She had agents in places nobody thought to look. She also had something very useful that most Imperial generals did not have. She had patience. She found what she was looking for in a file that had been compiled over 11 years of monitoring Earth's communications. The file was enormous. 8 billion people generated a lot of information. But Marin knew what she was looking for, and she found it. Commander Yara Ose, age 34, daughter of General Amara Ose, no siblings, father deceased, killed in a training accident when Yara was 9 years old, extended family, 1 aunt, 2 cousins, 3 people who appeared consistently in personal communications over the last decade, 3 people whose names appeared more than any others, 3 people that Commander Yara Ose, by every measure of human behavior that Marin's analyst could find, loved more than anything. Marin brought her plan to the Emperor. He listened. He was quiet for a long time after she finished. "It is not a military solution," he said. "No," said Marin. "It is a better one. The galaxy is watching," said the Emperor. "After what happened in the Sol system, every species we control is watching very carefully. If we use a hostage, if it works," said Marin, "it will not matter what they think, because they will see that even the humans, even the species that defeated 10,000 ships with one, even they break when you find the right pressure point. And if every watching civilization sees that, they will understand that resistance is not just dangerous. It is pointless because the Empire always finds the weakness. The Empire always wins." The Emperor looked at her, "And if it does not work?" Marin did not answer immediately. "It will work," she said. The Odyssey had been back on Earth for 6 days when the second message arrived. It was not like the first message. The first message had come from an Imperial ship in orbit, broadcast across every frequency, in every language, impossible to miss. This message came quietly on a single encrypted frequency, addressed specifically to Commander Yara Ose, no one else. Yara was in a debrief session when her personal communicator vibrated. She looked at the screen. The message was 4 words long. 4 words and a video file attached. The 4 words were, "Watch this, then decide." She watched it alone. In a small room off the debrief hall. Door closed. Screen tilted away from the window. The video was 40 seconds long. In those 40 seconds, she saw her aunt, Dr. Keiko Ose, sitting in a chair in a room she did not recognize. She saw her 2 cousins, Marcus and Sina, standing behind their mother. They were not visibly hurt. They were not in chains. They were simply sitting and standing in an unfamiliar room, and the expressions on their faces were the expressions of people who are frightened, but trying not to show it. A voice spoke over the video. The voice was calm and precise and completely without emotion. "These 3 individuals are currently guests of the Galactic Empire. They are comfortable, they are unharmed. They will remain that way. The Empire makes one request. Commander Yara Ose will transmit her complete surrender and stand down all Earth defense systems within 12 hours. If she does so, her family will be returned without harm. If she does not, they will be executed publicly. Broadcast on every frequency so that every species in the galaxy understands what happens to the families of those who resist the Empire." The video ended. Yara sat in the dark room for a very long time. She did not move. She did not make a sound. She sat and she breathed and she looked at the blank screen where her family had just been. Then she stood up, walked back into the debrief room, sat down and said very quietly, "We have a problem." The Emergency Unified Defense Council met within the hour. General Amara Ose sat at the head of the table. She had watched the video. Her face showed nothing. But the people who knew her well, the people who had worked beside her for 11 years, noticed something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something tight, something controlled with considerable effort. Keiko was her sister Marcus and Sina were her nephew and niece. She sat at the head of the table and showed nothing. "Report on the extraction attempt," she said. Dr. Marcus Hale looked at his notes. "We have been unable to locate the holding facility. The signal from the video was routed through 17 relay points across 4 star systems. We traced it back as far as the Vorkai outer colonies and then lost it. We do not know where they are being held." "Silence options," said General Ose. "We could attempt to negotiate," began someone. "The Empire does not negotiate," said the general. "Next option. We could comply with the demand." "We will not comply," said the general. "Not under any circumstances. The moment we comply, we demonstrate that this works. Every human being on this planet becomes a potential hostage. Every person with any connection to anyone in a position of responsibility becomes a target. We do not comply." "Next option." Another silence, longer this time. "There is a third option," said Yara. The room looked at her. She was very still, not the stillness of someone who is calm, the stillness of someone who is holding a great deal of something very still so it does not spill. "What option?" said her mother. Yara looked at her. "We let them think it is working," she said. Here is the thing about Yara Ose that most people did not know. Because most people only saw the commander, the calm one, the one who sat in the captain's chair while 10,000 warships fired everything they had and did not even stand up. Most people saw that and assumed calm was her nature, that she was simply built without the parts that produced fear or panic, or the kind of deep personal terror that grips a person when something they love is in danger. She was not built without those parts. She had every single one of those parts. They were working right now. She could feel them, she felt them the entire time she sat in that debrief room and spoke in a steady voice and laid out her plan and answered questions and did not let any of the people around the table see what was happening behind her eyes. But she had learned something a long time ago. She had learned it the hard way. When she was 9 years old and a man in a uniform knocked on their door and told her and her mother that her father was not coming home, she had learned that feeling something and being controlled by it were two different things. You could feel it completely, feel every part of it. Let it exist inside you without pretending it did not. And still, choose what you did next. She called the Odyssey crew back to the ship at 300 hours. No announcement, no explanation over comms. Just a message to each crew member personally. They came, all 61 of them. Some still pulling on jackets as they came through the airlock. Some with sleep still in their eyes. All of them there. Yara stood in the center of the bridge and told them everything. The video, the hostages, the demand. She told them about the plan, the full plan, the part that most of the council did not know yet, the part that only 3 people on Earth knew. Yara herself, her mother, and Dr. Chen Wei, who had designed it 11 years ago as a contingency that everyone hoped they would never need. When she finished, the bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Dr. Ren Okafor said, "You built the contingency into the ship from the beginning." "Yes," said Yara. "The absorption field," he said slowly, working through it, "was not just designed to absorb incoming weapons fire." "No," said Yara. "It was designed to absorb anything," said Ren. "Any energy, any type, any magnitude." "Yes," he was quiet for a moment. "Including the Kyrath cannon," he said. The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. The Kyrath cannon, the Empire's final weapon. The weapon that had ended 3 civilizations and cracked 2 moons. The weapon that existed officially only in classified Imperial records, but which Dr. Chen Wei had inferred from the mathematical signatures of those destroyed worlds, had modeled, had built the Odyssey's field specifically to counter. The weapon that could destroy a solar system if the operator chose to use it at full power, including the Kyrath cannon, said Yara. "They will use it," said Lieutenant Priya from her station. "Yes," said Yara. "They will point it at Earth." "Yes, and you are going to fly into the path of it." Yara looked at her. "Yes." Priya nodded slowly, then she turned back to her console. "Then we should get moving," she said. "We have a lot of preparation to do, and I would prefer not to be rushed when we are doing something like this." The Odyssey launched at dawn. General Amara Osi watched it go from the observation deck of the Pacific facility. She watched it rise through the early morning clouds and disappear into the brightness above. She stood there for a long time after it was gone. Her communications officer appeared at her shoulder. "Ma'am, General Marin of the Imperial Forces is requesting a response to their ultimatum." Amara did not turn around. "Tell her the commander is considering her options," she said. "Tell her she will have an answer within 6 hours." "Yes." "Ma'am." The officer left. Amara stayed at the window. The sky was turning from pink to blue above her, somewhere up there. Her daughter was flying towards something that she herself had helped design, had helped build, had spent 11 years preparing for, and that she would now give anything to take back. She was a general first. Everything else second, she told herself this. Quietly, several times General Marin received the response and permitted herself a small feeling of satisfaction. Considering her options, that was the language of a person who was afraid. That was the language of someone doing the internal calculation of what they were willing to lose, and discovering that the answer was nothing. She had seen it before many times. It always ended the same way. She sent her reply. 6 hours is acceptable. The Empire is patient. Commander Osei is wise to think carefully. Then she activated the Kyrath cannon. Not to fire it, not yet, just to warm it up. Just to make sure that when the time came there would be no delay. The Kyrath cannon was not a small weapon. It occupied the entire rear third of a ship that was itself the size of a small moon. It had been built over 40 years by the greatest weapons engineers the Empire had ever produced. It had been used 6 times in Imperial history. 6 times was enough. 6 uses and 47 civilizations had understood what it meant. You did not need to fire it often when people understood what it could do. 4 hours into the 6-hour window, Marin's scanner officer looked up from his console. "General," he said, "the Odyssey has launched from Earth." Marin looked at him. "One ship," said the officer, "moving on a direct intercept course with our position. At current speed, it will reach us in approximately 90 minutes. Marin was still. "One ship," she said. "Yes, General. They are sending the Odyssey." "Yes." "General," Marin thought about this. It did not fit the pattern she had expected. She had expected compliance, or she had expected negotiation. She had not expected this. She had not expected them to send the ship back out. She looked at her scanner. The Odyssey, small and gray and steady, moving directly toward her position at a calm, unhurried speed. She felt something move through her. Something she had not felt in 40 years of service. Uncertainty. She opened a channel to the Odyssey. "Commander Osei," she said, "you have 4 family members whose safety depends on your next decision. I strongly advise you to reconsider whatever you are currently doing." Yara's voice came back immediately. "General Marin," she said, and her voice was the same voice it had been in the Sol system. The same voice that had spoken to Scarith with 10,000 ships in front of it. Steady and unhurried and carrying no anger. Just clarity. "I know who you are, I have read your record. 19 worlds without a single weapon fired. You are very good at what you do," a pause. "But you made a mistake." Marin's eyes narrowed. "Did I?" "You took my family," said Yara. "You assumed that would make me afraid to act. You were right, I am afraid. I want you to know that clearly. I am genuinely afraid for them." Another pause. "But you do not understand something about humans, General. Something important. Fear does not stop us from acting. It never has. If anything, it does the opposite on Earth." The 6-hour window expired. Marin received no surrender. She activated the next phase. Her communications officer broadcast on every open channel. "Every frequency, everything, people of Earth. Your commander has chosen not to comply with Imperial terms. You are now witnessing the consequences of that choice." The camera feed went live. Yara's aunt and cousins sitting in that unfamiliar room. Broadcast on every frequency, to every watching civilization. "Commander Osei has 90 minutes to stand down," said Marin's voice over the feed. "If she does not, this broadcast ends, and so do they. On 100 worlds. On hidden screens and secret frequencies in small dark rooms where enslaved species had been watching since the Sol system engagement. Beings who had not dared to hope in a very long time watched the feed with their hearts in their mouths, because they had seen what the Odyssey had done, and then they had seen the Empire's answer, and they understood what this moment meant. If the humans broke now, if Commander Osei looked at her family on that screen and the fear finally won, finally reached past the thinking and the training and the careful preparation, if she did what every instinct and every living creature screamed at her to do, then hope would end. Again. The way it always ended inside the Odyssey. Yara watched the broadcast, her family on screen, her aunt's face, trying to be calm, her cousin standing very still. She watched it for exactly 10 seconds. Then she turned to Ren. "How are the capacitors?" She said Ren did not look up from his console. "Fully charged from the Sol system engagement, Commander. We have been maintaining field integrity since launch. Ready on your order. And the contingency system?" Ren was quiet for one moment. "Active," he said. "Tested and active," Yara nodded. She looked at the Kyrath cannon ship on her scanner, the size of a small moon. She looked at her family on the broadcast screen. She looked at her crew. 61 people who had come back to this ship at a 300 hours and not one of them had said no. Not one. She opened the ship-wide channel. "All crew," she said. "The Empire's weapon is going to fire in approximately 60 minutes. It will fire at Earth. We are going to intercept it. Our field will absorb the impact. Dr. Chenwei designed the system specifically for this weapon. The physics works, the math works, we have tested every component." She paused. "I will not pretend this is not frightening. It is. It is the most frightening thing any of us will ever do. But I want you to remember something. The Empire chose this moment because they believe fear will win. They have won that way for 10,000 years. They have used the people we love against us because they believe love is a weakness." Her voice was very steady. "Today we show them that love is not a weakness. Today we show them it is exactly the opposite." The Kyrath cannon fired 43 minutes later. Not at its full power. Marin was precise in all things. She did not want to destroy the solar system. She wanted to destroy Earth, specifically surgically as a demonstration. The beam that left the cannon was not light. It was not energy in any form that human physics had a comfortable name for. It was a focused collapse of local space-time, a directed unraveling of the bonds that held matter together, a beam of pure ending pointed at one blue-green planet. It traveled toward Earth at a speed that made light seem slow. The Odyssey moved into its path. What happened in the next 4 seconds was recorded by every sensor in the Sol system, by every observation platform, by every hidden vessel watching at the system's edge. It was studied for 300 years afterward. The beam hit the Odyssey's absorption field. The field held. For 2 full seconds, the beam poured into the Odyssey's system, more energy than the ship had been designed to hold, more than the Sol system engagement, more than all the weapons tests combined, more than the math said was survivable. The math had been wrong. Not wrong in the dangerous direction. Wrong in the other direction because Dr. Chen Wei, working alone in his laboratory at 3 a.m. 7 years ago, had made a calculation error that he had never caught. And the error had made his safety margins not smaller than reality but larger. The system could hold more than he had thought. Considerably more. The Odyssey did not break. It blazed brighter than the sun for 2 seconds. The Odyssey was the brightest object in the solar system. Then the beam ended, because the Kyrath cannon had fired everything it had, and the Odyssey had taken all of it. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Yara's voice came over every channel. Calm, steady, not even breathing hard. Earth, this is Commander Osi. We are intact. All systems operational, field saturation at an interesting number which Dr. Okafor will explain later. No casualties, the beam has been absorbed, she paused. Then added, General Marin, I believe you are now out of weapons. On 100 worlds, in 100 dark rooms, beings who had not let themselves hope in a very long time, did something they had forgotten how to do. They hoped in deep in the Imperial Palace, in a small dark room that no one else knew about. The Emperor sat alone and looked at the feed from the Sol system, at the Odyssey blazing in the dark. Still there, still whole, he sat for a long time. Then he picked up his communicator and called General Marin, and told her to release the hostages. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire was 340 years old. In 340 years, he had seen many things. He had seen species beg. He had seen species fight. He had seen species burn. He had seen the greatest civilizations in the known galaxy reduced to silence and dust and memory. And he had watched all of it from a throne built from the bones of conquered worlds, and felt nothing in particular about any of it. Feeling things was not efficient. Feeling things slowed down decisions. He had removed feeling from his process a long time ago. The same way you remove a malfunctioning component from a machine, cleanly, completely, and without sentiment. He was a machine now in the way that mattered. He processed information. He made decisions. He produced outcomes. For 300 years this had worked perfectly. Then one small gray ship had absorbed the Kyrath cannon. He sat in his small dark room for 4 hours after he made the call to Marin. He sat and he thought and he did something he had not done in a very long time. He felt something, not fear exactly, something older than fear, something that lived underneath fear. In the place where very intelligent beings go when they realize that their entire model of how the universe works has just been quietly and completely dismantled. The universe had a rule: the strong survive, the weak disappear. He had built his entire existence on that rule. He had built an empire on it. And now a species had arrived that was strong enough to absorb everything he threw at them, and gentle enough to let his fleet go home, and patient enough to spend 11 years preparing, and brave enough to fly one ship into the path of the Kyrath cannon. And he did not know what category to put them in. Strong, obviously, but not cruel. And in his experience, strength without cruelty did not exist. Strength without cruelty was a story that weak species told themselves to feel better. Except it was sitting right there on his scanner, blazing like a small sun, still whole, still calm, still choosing what to do next. Marin released the hostages 3 hours after the Emperor's call. She did it without explanation, without negotiation, without any of the performance that usually accompanied imperial decisions. She simply opened the door of the room where they had been held and said very quietly, to no one in particular, "They may go." Then she walked to her command chair and sat down and looked at the Odyssey on her scanner. Still there, still blazing. She had spent 40 years reading people, reading the small signals, the hesitations, the micro-expressions, the words chosen and the words avoided, finding the weakness and pressing there. She was very good at it, but she had misread this one. She had looked at Commander Yara Osi and seen a daughter, and daughters, in her experience, always broke when their family was threatened. Always, she had never been wrong about that. Until today, she sat in her chair and she thought about what that meant. Not tactically, not strategically. She thought about what it meant that a person could love someone completely, could be genuinely afraid for them, could feel all of it fully, and still choose to fly into the Kirath cannon. She thought about that for a long time. Yara's Aunt Keiko and her cousins Marcus and Sena were transported back to Earth on a small neutral vessel, operated by a species called the Then, who had spent 200 years as Imperial servants, and who had volunteered for this particular job the moment they heard what was happening. The Then pilot, a young female named Osa, did not speak much, but when Keiko thanked her for the transport, Osa looked at her with 4 pale eyes and said, very carefully in accented but clear English, "We have been watching your family for 3 days. We did not know humans before this, we know them now. It is an honor to carry you home." Keiko did not know what to say to that. She held Osa's 4-fingered hand for a moment. That was enough. The Odyssey held its position outside Earth's orbit for 6 hours after the Kirath cannon engagement. Not because it needed to. The ship was fully operational. Every system running. The crew unharmed. The absorbed energy sitting in the capacitors like a sleeping sun. It held position because Yara needed to think. She sat in her captain's chair and she thought. She thought about the Empire, about the Emperor, sitting somewhere in his palace, processing what had happened about Marin, who had released the hostages not because she was forced to, but because her Emperor had told her to, which meant the Emperor had made a choice. A real choice. The Emperor could have escalated. He could have sent another fleet. He could have pointed another weapon. He had chosen not to, and choices, Yara had learned from her mother, were the most important thing in the universe. More important than weapons, more important than technology, more important than the size of your fleet or the power of your ship. Choices were what you actually were, she called her mother. General Amara Ose appeared on the screen looking exactly the same as she always looked, which was to say composed and watchful and like a person who was not going to tell you what she was feeling. Unless she decided to. She had decided to. "Keiko and the children are home," she said. Before Yara could speak. "They are safe. They are being checked by medical." "They are fine," Yara exhaled, one long, slow breath. "Good," she said. A pause. Her mother looked at her through the screen. "You should have told me," said Amara. "I know, the full plan. You should have told me before you launched." "I know," said Yara. "You would have tried to stop me." Amara was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said, "I would have." Another pause. "I would have been wrong to," said Amara. It was the closest thing to "I was afraid for you" that General Amara Osi had ever said to her daughter in a professional context. Yara understood it completely. "I know," she said softly. "I know." "Mom?" She opened a channel to Imperial space 30 minutes later. Not to Marin, not to Scarith, to the Emperor himself. She did not know if he would respond. She sent the request and waited. The response came back in 7 minutes, which meant, Yara noted, that the Emperor had been sitting near his communications console, which meant he had been waiting, which meant he had expected her to call, which told her a great deal. The Emperor's face on screen was not what she had expected. She had expected something dramatic, something that looked like power. He was simply old, an old-faced, gray-skinned, with 4 arms folded across his chest and black eyes that were very still and very watchful. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they are trying to understand. "Commander Ose," he said. "Emperor," she said. They looked at each other across a distance of several thousand light-years for a moment. "You absorbed the Kirath cannon," he said. "Yes. My scientists tell me that should not have been possible. Your scientists were working from incomplete information," said Yara. "We have been studying your technology for 11 years. We understood your weapons better than you understood ours." The Emperor was quiet. "And now?" he said. "Now we talk," said Yara. "About what?" "About what comes next," she said. "Because something comes next. It always does. You can send another fleet. You can build another weapon. You can spend the next decade trying to find something that works against us. And we will spend that same decade getting better at absorbing it, or—" She paused. "Or we can talk about something different." "I am listening," said the Emperor. And Yara Osi, commander of the Earth Defense Vessel Odyssey, 34 years old, daughter of a general, captain of 61 people who had chosen to come back to the ship at 0300 hours without being asked twice, took a breath and said what she had been preparing to say since the first day she read the mission briefing 11 years ago. Not the part about the ship, not the part about the weapons, the other part, the part that was not in the official briefing, but that she had written into her own private notes the first week she joined the project, when she was 23 years old and still new enough to believe that the point of preparing for a fight was to find a way not to have it. Your empire controls 60% of the known galaxy, she said. You have 3 million warships. You have 47 destroyed civilizations on your record. And right now, at this moment, you are sitting in a palace built from conquered bones, talking to a human commander whose ship absorbed your most powerful weapon and is still floating calmly in space. She looked at him. How is that working for you? The Emperor blinked. It was a very small movement, but Yara saw it. I am serious, she said. Not as an insult, as a real question. You have spent 10,000 years conquering. Are you satisfied? Is the Empire what you wanted it to be? Are the beings under your control happy? Are you? A very long silence. Emperors do not discuss satisfaction, he said finally. I know, said Yara. That is exactly the problem. Here is what most people watching that conversation did not know. Because most people were watching on the various feeds and relay stations across the galaxy, watching two figures on a screen, a young human commander and a 300-year-old emperor, and they were watching for the things they expected to see. A demand, a threat, a negotiation, a surrender. What most of them did not know was that this conversation had been planned, not by Yara alone, not even by Yara and her mother. It had been planned across 11 years by every member of the Emergency Unified Defense Council, refined through 600 simulations, tested against every possible Imperial response, built around one central insight that Dr. Chen Wei had put in the very first project document, and that no one had ever removed. The insight was this: you cannot defeat an empire with a better weapon. Because empires always build bigger weapons, you can only defeat an empire by changing what it wants. And the only way to change what something wants is to show it something it has never seen before, something it cannot categorize, something that does not fit any existing model. A ship that absorbs weapons and then lets the fleet go home. A commander who flies into the Kyrath cannon for her family and still refuses to surrender. A species that spends 11 years preparing for a fight and then, when they win the fight, immediately asks if there is another way. 47 civilizations, said Yara. The Emperor looked at her. You destroyed 47 civilizations, she said. Not conquered, not absorbed, destroyed. Gone, no record, no survivors. No history, yes, said the Emperor. Why? She said a pause. They resisted. So did we, said Yara. We did more than resist. We beat your fleet with one ship and absorbed your best weapon. We are still here. Are you going to destroy us? The Emperor was very still. That is becoming increasingly impractical, he said. So what does that tell you? Said Yara. What does it tell you that the one species you could not erase is the one standing here asking you to stop? Another silence, longer this time. What exactly are you proposing, Commander? Said the Emperor. I am proposing, said Yara carefully, that you have spent 10,000 years building a structure. A very large, very powerful, very expensive structure, and I am suggesting that the structure has a flaw in it that has been there since the beginning and that you have never had to face because nothing was ever strong enough to show it to you. And what is the flaw? It only works, said Yara, if everyone is afraid of you. She let that sit for a moment. The moment someone stops being afraid, the whole thing starts to come apart. Because fear is the only thing holding it together. Not loyalty, not agreement, not shared purpose, just fear. And fear is the least reliable material you can build anything out of. Because the moment something comes along that people are less afraid of than they are of you, or something comes along that they love more than they fear you, the whole structure cracks. She looked at him. We are that crack, far across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, on hidden screens and secret frequencies. Beings who had been slaves for generations were watching this conversation. The Serenai Elder Sail was watching from a small room that she shared with 11 other Serenai, on a station that the Empire used for mineral processing. She had been a slave for 63 years. She had been listening to forbidden frequencies for 40 of them. She had watched the Sol system engagement. She had watched the Kyrath cannon. She had watched the hostage situation and the release, and now she was watching this. An old emperor and a young human commander having a conversation that no one in the history of the Empire had ever had before, not because no one had ever wanted to, but because no one had ever been in a position to. Sail reached out in the dark and took the hand of the young Serenai beside her. He was 22 years old. He had been born into slavery. He had never known anything else. She did not say anything. She just held his hand and they watched the screen together. "I have ruled for 300 years, said the Emperor. "I know," said Yara. "I have never been spoken to this way." "I know that too," said Yara. "I am speaking to you this way because I think you are capable of hearing it. I think you are more intelligent than your actions suggest. I think you have been operating inside a system for so long that you have stopped questioning whether the system is right." A pause. "I think," she said more quietly, "that somewhere in 300 years, you stopped being the builder of the empire and started being a component of it. And components do not ask whether the machine should exist. They just run." The Emperor looked at her for a long time. "You are very young," he said. "Yes," said Yara. "You believe things are simpler than they are." "Sometimes," she said. "But I also just absorbed the Kyrath cannon, so I think you should hear me out." Something happened on the Emperor's face. It was very small, almost invisible, but it was there. It might have been in a 300-year-old face that had forgotten how to show such things. Something like a smile. The conversation lasted 4 hours. The full contents were never released publicly. What was released 3 days later, in a joint statement broadcast on every frequency across the known galaxy, was a document, not a treaty, not a surrender, not a declaration of war or peace or anything that fit neatly into any existing category. It was called, in the official translation, the Osei Accord, named not by humans. Named by the Emperor himself, it had 7 points. The first point was that the Galactic Empire would immediately suspend all active conquest operations. The second was that all enslaved species would be given autonomous governance within a period of 10 years, with imperial support for the transition. The third was that the 47 destroyed civilizations would be officially acknowledged in imperial record, their names restored, their histories reconstructed from whatever fragments remained. The fourth was the formation of a galactic council, with seats for every species in imperial space, including humanity. The fifth was a mutual defense agreement, under which the Odyssey's technology would be shared with all council members, so that no species would ever again be destroyed simply because they could not defend themselves. The sixth was a commitment to 100 years of no new conquest, after which the council would review. The seventh point was 3 words that Yara had insisted on, 3 words that the Emperor had considered for 6 hours before agreeing. The seventh point said, "We are enough." It was directed at no one in particular. It was a statement that no empire needed to be larger than it was, that no civilization needed to consume others to survive, that the universe was large enough for everyone. The reaction across the galaxy was not immediate. Things that big rarely produce immediate reactions. They produce silence first. The kind of silence that happens when something so large and so unexpected occurs that the mind needs time to understand what it is experiencing. On 100 worlds in 100 dark rooms, beings who had been slaves sat in that silence, then slowly, one by one, and then in groups, and then all at once. They began to make noise, not speeches, not declarations, just noise. The noise of people who have been very quiet for a very long time and have just been given permission to be loud. On the mineral processing station, Sale heard the Accord broadcast, all 7 points. She listened to all of them without moving. The young Serenai beside her was crying, not quietly. He had never learned to cry quietly because he had never before had anything to cry about that felt like this. Sale did not cry. She was thinking. She was thinking about the first planet the Empire had conquered. 10,000 years ago, her planet. She was thinking about the green world it had been, the oceans and the soft people who had never built a weapon, and the Vorkai ships arriving and the fires. She was thinking about 10,000 years of silence, 10,000 years of small rooms and forbidden frequencies and hoping for something that never came. And now this, a young human commander and an old emperor and 7 points and 3 words. We are enough. She sat very still for a long time. Then she stood up. She was not a young being. Her bones ached and her eyes were not what they had been. But she stood up straight in the small dark room. And she looked at the young Serenai who was crying, and she said, "We have work to do." Yara returned to Earth 2 days after the Accord was signed. The Odyssey came down through the clouds the same way it had gone up, slowly, without ceremony. A gray ship with burn marks and a few new scorch patterns from the Kyrath cannon engagement. It did not look like a ship that had just changed the galaxy. It looked like it always had. Slightly used, slightly worn. Exactly itself. There was no parade. Yara had specifically asked for no parade. There was a small gathering at the Pacific facility, the council members and the engineering teams, and the people who had spent 11 years building toward this. General Amara Osei was standing at the edge of the landing platform when the Odyssey's ramp came down. She was not in uniform. She was just standing there in a gray jacket with her hands at her sides, not behind her back, just at her sides. And when Yara walked down the ramp, she walked toward her daughter, and she put her arms around her and held on. She did not say anything for a long time. When she did speak, her voice was very quiet, the voice she used when she was not being a general. "Your father would have been so proud of you," she said. Yara closed her eyes. "I know," she said. They stood there for a moment, on a platform above the Pacific, the ocean bright below them, the sky enormous above. Then Amara pulled back, straightened her jacket, became the general again. "The Galactic Council meets in 6 weeks," she said. "We need representation. We need a position on the transition timeline for the Serenai. We need to decide who is going to help reconstruct the histories of the 47. "Mom," said Yara. "Yes?" "Can we have 1 hour?" said Yara. "Just 1 hour before we start the next thing?" Amara looked at her. Then she looked at the ocean. Then she looked back at her daughter. At this person she had raised and trained and sent into the Kyrath Cannon's path, and who had come back and changed everything and was now asking for 1 hour. 1 hour, said Amara. They sat on the edge of the platform and looked at the ocean and did not talk about anything important for 60 minutes. They talked about small things, the weather, whether the facility canteen had gotten better coffee since Yara had been away, a memory Amara had of Yara's father, something funny he had said once on a Tuesday morning that neither of them could fully remember, but both of them could still hear. Small things. The kind of small things that are not small at all, the kind that hold everything together. 61 minutes after they sat down, Amara stood up. "The Galactic Council," she said. Yara stood. "The Galactic Council," she agreed. They walked back toward the facility together. 3 weeks later, the first official Serenai communication arrived at Earth. It was from Sael. It was addressed to Commander Yara Osei personally. It said, "Commander, my name is Sael. I am of the Serenai, the first people your empire will help to be free. I have been listening to forbidden frequencies for 40 years. I was listening when you spoke to your fleet before the Sol system engagement. I was listening when you absorbed the Kyrath cannon. I was listening when you spoke to the Emperor. I want you to know that on that station, in the dark, we held hands. A young Serenai who was born into slavery held my hand, and we watched you together. He has never known a free world. He is going to know one now. I do not have words for what that means. I am not sure words exist for it. But I wanted you to know that we were watching. We are always watching. We were waiting for a very long time. Thank you for being worth waiting for." Yara read the message alone. In a small room, door closed, she read it twice. Then she put her communicator down on the table and looked at the wall for a long time. She was not going to cry. She was not. She was a commander. She was absolutely not going to cry. She cried anyway, not for long, just for a moment. The kind of crying that is not sadness, that has no good name in any language. That happens when something so large and so real and so completely human lands in the chest and the body does not know what else to do with it. Then she wiped her eyes, picked up her communicator, and wrote back, "Sael, my name is Yara. We were not brave because we were not afraid. We were brave because we were afraid and we did it anyway. I think that is what bravery is. I think that is what all of this is. I am glad you are watching. Tell the young Serenai his world is coming. It will take time. It will take a great deal of work from a great many people, but it is coming. We are going to build something better, all of us, together. Watch this space." Far across the galaxy, in the quiet of the mineral processing station, a message arrived on a forbidden frequency. Sael read it. Then she found the young Serenai, the one who had been born into slavery, the one who had never known a free world. She showed him the message. He read it slowly, in the way of someone who has taught themselves to read on stolen time and treats words carefully because of it. When he finished, he looked up. "Watch this space," he said. "Yes," said Sael. He looked at the screen, at the stars beyond the station window, at the enormous galaxy out there. 60% of which was beginning, slowly, painfully, genuinely, to change. Okay, he said quietly. He was 22 years old. He had been born into slavery. He had never known a free world. He was going to. The Galactic Empire sent its strongest fleet. Humanity sent one ship. The fleet came to end a world. The ship came to begin one. And in the long memory of the universe, which remembered every battle ever fought across billions of years of darkness, this was the one it would tell forever. Not because of the weapons, not because of the technology, not because of the absorption field or the Kirath cannon or the gravity lock or any of the extraordinary things that small gray ship had done, but because of what happened after, because of a young commander who flew into the end of everything and came out the other side and immediately asked, "Now what can we build?" Because of an old emperor who had spent 300 years as a component of a machine and chose at the end to be something more. Because of a Serenai elder on a mineral processing station holding the hand of a boy who was going to know a free world. Because of 61 people who came back to a ship at 0300 hours without being asked twice. Because the universe had a memory. And this was worth remembering. And